The night the sky burned red, a Viking warrior vanished from the battlefield without a trace. They said Odin himself had taken him, alive, into Valhalla. But a month later, he returned, and what he carried back was not glory, but a warning that would shatter the north. The rain fell sideways, driven by a wind so cold it could crack bone. The fjord below churned like a beast, swallowing the longships that had brought them here. Above the cliff, the shield wall trembled under the weight of iron and rage. War horns bellowed through the storm, and the ground shook as hundreds of men surged forward. Steel bit into steel, arrows fell like black rain. Every breath was laced with salt, blood, and smoke. In the center of it all was Eirik Thorson, a man built like the prow of a ship, his beard thick with frost, and his eyes fixed on a single point in the chaos. He had fought in 20 battles, seen friends buried in the frozen earth, and taken oaths under the gods under skies lit by the northern lights. But this battle, this was different. He knew it the moment the first arrow split a man's skull beside him. He could feel the Norns, those 3 sisters who wove the fates of men, tightening the threads around his life. A massive warrior in blackened mail broke through the shield wall ahead, swinging a sword as long as a man's arm. Eirik charged, slamming his shoulder into the man's chest. The sound of cracking ribs was drowned by the roar of men screaming Odin's name. The fight became a blur, splintered shields, glinting steel, the taste of iron in his mouth. He fought until his arms felt carved from stone, until the world narrowed to the rhythm of swing and strike. And then, the spear. It came from nowhere, long, cruel, and humming with the whistle of death. It pierced his side clean through, the impact knocking him to his knees. Pain flared white, then red, then black. His fingers slipped from his sword, and the battlefield spun above him. He collapsed onto the frozen ground, the sound of battle fading like a tide pulling away. Eirik knew the sagas. He knew what was supposed to happen next. If he had died bravely in battle, the Valkyries would come, maidens in shining mail, riding horses that breathed mist. They would lift him from the field and carry him to Valhalla, Odin's great hall where warriors feasted and fought until the end of days. But those were stories, myths. And yet, as his vision dimmed, the rain stopped, the screams faded. A golden light broke through the storm clouds above, warming his frozen skin. He felt hands, strong but gentle, lift him from the ground. He tried to speak but could not. The world below shrank, the battlefield disappearing into the mist. The light grew brighter, until it swallowed everything. When he awoke, he was standing on a vast plain beneath a sky the color of burning gold. Before him stretched a hall so massive it could hold 1,000 ships. Its roof was made of shields, its walls of spears. From inside came the roar of laughter, the clashing of swords, the scent of roasted boar. A figure stood at the gates, tall, one-eyed, and wearing a cloak that rippled like a storm cloud. "Odin," Eirik whispered. The god only smiled and stepped aside. "Welcome, son of Thor's people. You have walked into Valhalla, alive." It should have been impossible. Men only came here in death. But here he was, breathing, standing, his heart still beating in his chest. Around him, warriors from every age lifted their horns in greeting. Romans in bronze, Saxons in mail, warriors with weapons older than memory. And deep inside, he felt something shift. Days passed, or maybe centuries. Time meant nothing in this place.
He drank from horns that never emptied, fought in battles that ended with laughter, feasted on meat carved from beasts reborn each dawn. But the gods were watching him, testing him. And then came the prophecy, spoken in a voice that rattled the bones of the hall. "A war is coming," Odin said, "one that no man can win, not even we." When Eric awoke again, he was lying on a wooden bed in his village, his side still bleeding from the spear wound. His people gasped, calling him a ghost, a trick of the gods. But he knew what he had seen, and the prophecy burned in his mind like a brand. That night, the sea grew restless, and the war began.
The warrior's return should have been a night of celebration. Instead, it became the night the village learned to fear its own hero. He came at dusk, when the fjords swallowed the last of the sun. His ship, or what was left of it, drifted in like a corpse on the tide. The mast was broken, the sail torn and blackened, as though fire had licked it in the open sea. He stood alone at the bow, a shadow carved from stone, his beard tangled with salt and ash, his eyes reflecting the pale fire of the northern sky. The villagers gathered in silence. No songs of welcome, no feast, just the sound of the water slapping against the hull and the creak of rotting wood. He stepped onto the shore without speaking. The air around him felt heavier, as if the sea itself had followed him onto land. It was Astrid, the Shieldmaiden, who first found her voice. "You were dead," she said, her tone caught between wonder and accusation. The warrior looked at her, and for a moment she saw something in his gaze that made her blood turn cold. Not madness, not grief, but the weight of someone who had seen too much. He said, "I was." And then he began to speak. He told them of the final moments of the battle, the clash of shield walls, the war horns echoing through the valley, the smell of wet earth and blood. He remembered the enemy pressing harder, the rain turning the ground to mud, the air thick with screams. And then the sky split open. Not like lightning, not like storm, but as if the heavens themselves had been torn apart. Through the rift poured a golden light so bright it burned through the rain. He swore he heard a horn, deeper than any mortal could sound, and the roar of warriors calling his name. He felt no pain when the spear struck him, no fear when his knees gave way. Only warmth, only the pull of something vast and ancient. When he opened his eyes, he stood in a hall unlike any he had ever known. He described it to them, the Hall of the Slain, vast enough to hold 1,000 feasts, its walls gleaming like hammered gold, its roof thatched with shields from every age of man. Fires roared in pits the size of longships, casting light on warriors from across time. Romans in crested helms, Greeks with bronze spears, Vikings with axes still dripping from their last battle. Odin himself sat at the high table, one eye burning brighter than the sun, ravens perched on each shoulder. At his side, Valkyries poured mead into horns the size of a man's arm, the drink spilling like molten amber. But it wasn't the feasting or the glory that he remembered most. It was the silence that fell when Odin raised his hand. "Your war is not over," the Allfather said. "The last battle comes sooner than you think." The warrior said he was sent back, not to live, but to warn. A war was coming, one that no shield wall could hold, no axe could win. The enemy would not be men, but something older, something that had slept since the world was young. At first no one spoke. The fire cracked in the center of the longhouse, and the wind howled beyond the walls. Then the whispers began. Some believed him, their faces pale. Others muttered that he was cursed, that he had brought bad luck from the realm of the dead. Old Einar, the skald, leaned forward. "Tell us," he said, "what army comes? Is it the Saxons, the Franks, the Rus?" The warrior's voice dropped to a whisper. "No, it is the wolves." The room stilled. They knew the stories.
Fenrir, the great wolf who would break his chains at Ragnarok. His children, the shadow wolves who hunted the sun and moon. But those were tales for winter nights, not warnings for the living. Wolves can be killed, one man scoffed, but his voice shook. Not these, the warrior replied. I saw them beyond the gates of Valhalla, pacing in the dark between worlds. Their eyes were fire, their breath was ice, and they were waiting for the horn. He looked at them all, one by one. The horn will sound soon. I have seen the man who will blow it. He walks among us already. The weeks that followed were uneasy. The warrior kept mostly to himself, repairing his weapons, sharpening blades that would never be sharp enough. He walked the cliffs at night, staring into the black sea as if expecting it to rise. Children followed him at a distance, daring each other to get close. The elders muttered that a man taken by the gods should stay with the gods. Even Astrid, who had once fought beside him, began to watch him with suspicion. Then came the first sign. A shepherd stumbled into the village one morning, his face pale, his hands shaking. His entire flock had vanished in the night. No blood, no tracks, nothing, except one thing. A paw print, the size of a man's chest, burned into the earth. Fear spread quickly. Hunters swore they saw shapes in the tree line, too big to be bears, too silent to be men. The nights grew colder, the moon dimmer, as though something had begun to swallow the light. One night, Astrid confronted the warrior. If you truly came from Valhalla, why do you not lead us now? Why do you only speak of doom? He looked at her for a long time and said, Because I have seen the end, and it begins with trust. Before she could speak, the horn sounded, not from the gods, but from the village watchtower. Shadows moved at the edge of the torchlight, their eyes glowing like embers. The wolves had come early. The warrior raised his axe. The villagers formed a shield wall, the old and the young clutching weapons with trembling hands. The first wolf stepped into the firelight, and it was no beast of the forest. Its fur shimmered like steel, its teeth longer than a man's hand, each breath a cloud of frost. The warrior shouted over the roar of the fire, Do not break the line! But when the wolves struck, the night exploded into chaos. Shields splintered, men screamed, the snow turned red. The warrior fought like one possessed, each blow cutting through flesh and shadow alike. Yet for every wolf that fell, 2 more took its place. Then, in the middle of the battle, the warrior saw him, a man standing beyond the fight, untouched, holding a horn carved from bone. The man met his gaze and smiled. The warrior knew then the prophecy had already begun.
The storm broke over the fjord like the wrath of the gods. Lightning split the night sky into jagged white scars, illuminating the dark waters in fleeting, terrifying flashes. In those moments of light, the villagers swore they could see shapes. Long ships gliding silently in the mist, their sails black as ravens' wings. No oars cut the water, no men shouted orders, yet the ships moved. Bjorn stood at the edge of the longhouse, his massive silhouette framed against the storm. Rain slicked down the scars on his face, pooling in the hollows beneath his eyes. He had been silent for hours, unmoving, staring out to sea. Behind him, the fire burned low, the warmth doing nothing to ease the tension in the air. The villagers whispered of the prophecy he had uttered just days earlier. A war is coming, one we cannot win. Some said it was madness brought on by too many battles. Others swore Odin himself had placed those words in his mouth. The omen. At dawn, the first omen appeared. A raven landed on the roof of the longhouse and did not move for an entire day. It did not eat, it did not drink. Its black eyes followed only Bjorn. The old skald, Eyvind, murmured that such a thing had only happened twice in living memory, and each time war followed within weeks. That night, as the wind howled, Bjorn called a gathering. The warriors came, one by one, into the flickering firelight. Men who had followed him into countless battles now sat in silence, watching him like children awaiting judgment. "I have walked in the halls of Valhalla," Bjorn began, his voice deep, echoing off the timbered walls. "I have sat at the table of the Allfather himself. I have heard the horn that will sound at the end of all things. And I tell you now—" He paused. The fire cracked. Rain hissed against the roof. "The horn has been raised to the lips of Heimdall, but it has not yet sounded." The disappearance. 3 nights later, Bjorn vanished. No one saw him leave, yet his weapons were gone. His bed was untouched. Outside, the raven still perched, but now its feathers were white. Tracks were found at the edge of the fjord, leading down to the water, but they ended in the waves. No boat had been taken. No man could swim those freezing waters without dying before sunrise. Still, Eyvind claimed he knew where Bjorn had gone. He spoke of an island that did not appear on any map, where warriors who had cheated death once before went to await the final call to battle. He swore Bjorn would return, not in this life, but on the day when the gods themselves marched to war. The battle nobody saw. Spring came. The ice broke. The first traders returned to the village with news. An entire settlement, 3 days to the east, have been wiped from the earth. No bodies were found. Only shattered shields, broken axes, and bloodstains that led into the sea. No longships had been seen leaving. No survivors had fled inland. It was as if the people had been taken by the ocean itself. One old fisherman claimed he had seen Bjorn on the cliffs above the village just before the attack. He swore his armor was glowing gold, like the sunlight in Odin's hall. And beside him, watching the sea, stood men in armor no one had ever seen before, strangers from different centuries, different lands, but all with the same cold, determined eyes. The last sight. Years later, long after the village had moved inland to escape the cursed fjord, a young shepherd stumbled upon something in the woods. It was a sword. Bjorn's sword. It lay stuck in the roots of an ancient oak, the steel untouched by rust despite decades in the earth. Carved into the tree beside it were words in runes. "When the sky breaks and the seas boil, follow the raven." The shepherd returned to the village, but when he came back to show the elders, the sword was gone. In its place sat a raven, its feathers black on one side, white on the other, watching him in silence. That night, the boy dreamed of a golden hall beyond the clouds, where warriors feasted and laughed, and at the far end of the table sat Bjorn, raising his horn in silent salute. The truth was lost to time, but in the north, some say he still walks the halls of Valhalla. Subscribe and join us for the next saga.